Welcome back to the news with Let's Talk Supply Chain, where today's headlines aren't just about disruptions, they're about remixing the entire supply chain playlist. From reshoring remixes to nearshoring plot twists, we've got questions that will make you laugh, make you think, and maybe even rethink your passport stamp. So buckle up, it's time to decode resilience with a little bit of fun. So welcome to the show, Dan, Dag, and Steve. I'd like each one of you to give us a brief introduction of who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your company. So Dan, why don't you start us off?
Thanks for having me. Dan Krouse, I'm the founder of Supplychainalytics. I'm a consulting firm that basically does mid-market consulting for manufacturers, retailers, distributors in the supply chain space, which is quite broad, but most recently a lot of tariff work. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So glad that you could be here. Dag, you're up next.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sarah. My name is Dag Calafell. I'm the Director of AI and Automation at MCA Connect. I bring with myself 25 years in manufacturing and supply chain, specifically in steel and also automotive. And the company I work at, MCA Connect, is a consultancy focused on driving innovation and efficiency using Microsoft technology and lean principles.
Steel and automotive are big topics right now with all the tariffs that Dan is talking about. So I can't wait to dive in. Steve, last but not least, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. My name's Steve Shebuski, colleague of DAG. So also work at MCA Connect. My role at the company is I focus on as our industry lead in CPG and distribution. So on the other side of the fence, really dealing with our distributors and our manufacturers that are going into big box retailers and those types of folks. So good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And lots to talk about there as well. So let's get started with you, Dag. I have a question for you. I want to know what the most dramatic supply chain remix you've witnessed lately. Reshoring, nearshoring, or offshoring. How did all of that play out?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that come to mind. Last week, a friend of mine brought up the Cadillac Alante story. And if you haven't heard that, back in the 1980s, there was a Cadillac that the entire supply chain started in Detroit. However, then the whole chassis got shipped to Italy for chassis work by Pininfarina. Sorry. They're the guys who do the Ferrari chassis. And then it came back to Detroit for final assembly. And so if you think about a supply chain where you're using Boeing 747s to move semi-finished goods, then you probably are off in a much better place than having a supply chain that's 7,000 miles long.
That's so true. But also recently, everybody has been talking about how reshoring, nearshoring, offshoring is a new topic. But you just talked about the 80s and how they were looking at both reshoring, nearshoring, and offshoring. And so it's kind of been playing out for years, and people are thinking about it. In the automotive and steel industry, are they thinking about it a lot, or is everything sort of stable right now?
No, definitely. As it relates to steel, a lot of the thought leadership out there is about looking at the different steel suppliers and the global supply and how that relates to the commodities pricing. But I think as it relates to automotive, there's a lot of use of Mexico and a lot of back and forth, similar to the Italy story. We're actually still doing that with Mexico. But if you look at overall total construction spending in manufacturing, there's actually been a bit of a dip in the past 9 months. So we had a huge spike after the pandemic. And since then, although it still is a good idea, I think that the economics, we're still trying to prove that out and understand the balance between risk and the economics of higher cost manufacturing.
Yes, it's so true. I was on Bloomberg a couple of months ago, and I talked about how if the iPhone was manufactured in the US, it would cost, I think, something like $3,000 to $4,000. And the host of Bloomberg was like, that's $10,000 in my household. I can't afford that. All right, Dan, if your supply chain had a passport, which stamp would it be most proud of in 2025? And which destination would it avoid at all costs?
I think I would get on a plane and fly to Vietnam immediately with all the work that's going on there and how work over the last few years has transitioned from China to Vietnam. I lived in Hong Kong for 12 years. I was in China every week, so I've got plenty of China stamps on my passport. So I probably would not be putting that on my bucket list right now.
I love that. Vietnam is a hot spot. There's a lot of companies that are looking at Vietnam. And I was talking to, I think it was somebody in education over there, and they're really ramping things up over there.
Well, and the real question is really is what kind of infrastructure is going to be there and how are they going to be able to compete with China, because it's a juggernaut. And you've got the labor component, the infrastructure component, power plants, roads, you name it, associated with manufacturing. And at some point, they may just not have the capacity, and that's why Mexico and India are other low labor rate locations that people are looking at significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to that Apple story, Apple had moved some of their manufacturing to India because it was a new consumer market for them as well. So lots of things to think about. But Steve, I want to bring you into the conversation. Is there a recent reshoring success story you can share, or maybe a nearshoring misstep that turned into an unexpected win? I love stories. So Steve, I want to bring you in for that story.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I think something comes to mind. I was working with a toy company, more of like an enterprise transformation, and obviously in the middle of that, our administration has had a lot to do with some serious tariffs on some of those types of products. So they've had to pivot really quickly to see if they could do some of the manufacturing here near shore to really service their B2C markets. And so, just does a lot to show with how innovative you can be with your space, moving things around in a warehouse, making space for new equipment, and really, transforming a facility to be multi-dimensional. They were able to do that in under 3 months to get back in the market and start servicing customers. So seeing some folks, really pivot really quickly to be flexible has a lot to do with, their ability to have the types of systems and infrastructure to do it. So that's been one of the ones I would probably mention here in the US.
I think that's a great story. And 3 months is super impressive. I mean, we talk about how supply chains don't change overnight, but sometimes with all of these tariffs and moving back and forth between are they in place or not in place, sometimes we almost feel like we have to do that. So I really appreciate that. So Steve, I'm bringing you back into the conversation. Which supply chain trend, reshoring, nearshoring, or global diversification, has been the real MVP for dodging disruptions in 2025? You just talked about how one of your customers was successful in reshoring, but there's a lot of disruptions that are happening right now. What would you say is the real MVP?
Well, I think I'm going to answer that in a little bit of a different way. I think the MVPs of all of this has really been our clients' ability to create more resilient supply chains, in that not necessarily just be able to nearshore, reshore, or do these pivots, but be flexible and have a network that allows them to flex into various regions and back out more easily, have diversification in suppliers, diversification in their labor as well. I think a lot of that is very dependent on infrastructure solutions. Those clients that have invested in data and ability to sort of shift things and have really sort of global solutions have been able to do that a lot more easily. So I think I'll put the MVP to those folks that have really invested over the last 5-7 years in flexibility in supply chain versus focusing on one thing or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I also think, making sure that with that diversification, you've got suppliers that you can tap into in a variety of locations that are ready to provide either raw materials or finished goods as you need it. And that takes a lot of resiliency. That takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of investment in technology. And so I'm glad that you brought that up. So Dan, how do you keep your supply chain team energized when every day brings another round of geopolitical curveballs? I think you've got a good story for us here.
Yeah, I spoke to a large group of project managers yesterday that came from a variety of industries. There was construction, healthcare, IT, and their job is to get projects to the goal line and manage all their internal stakeholders. But literally everyone in the room was impacted by tariffs in some form with their day job. And I think what I help them with is, here's a new skill set that you have will make you more invaluable to your company than you already are in terms of managing and mitigating tariffs across various projects, whether it's timelines, which countries to go to, how you work with procurement, the CFO, what's going to happen with interest rates, a variety of things that perhaps they weren't thinking of as strategically as they could. And they were pretty energized because they're looking at this like, wow, there's a whole new skill set here, and I can be even a bigger superstar with my company.
I think that's a great story because when it comes to resilience, it's not necessarily just about the supply chains being resilient, but it's also about the people and empowering them and for them to be also as resilient as the supply chain that they're managing and they're leading. Right, Dan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And there's steps that can be taken and ways that you can work through the process. What kind of scenarios are you going to build into your project plans? What do those timelines look like? Lots of questions on the recent court ruling and when the Supreme Court might render an opinion. And it could be anywhere from December to the middle of next year, or you got USMCA that's potentially be out there. China,
Yeah.
I reminded the room that, China the last time took 2 years, and at the end of 2 years, they walked away. So who knows where China will end up in this whole thing.
It's almost
So,
like a hurry up and wait.
yes. So, decision trees, critical things that have to happen on certain schedules. And, but it was a very energizing discussion.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Now, Dag, if supply chain resilience was a video game, and I think you play video games, I mean, you don't have to tell us, but I think you do. What's the trickiest level you've cleared and what power up made all the difference?
Yeah, great question. I had a client that I talked to about a month and a half ago, and they had a nightmare scenario. They had one of their largest suppliers get hit with a cybersecurity issue, and then that crippled their ability to ship for like 2 or 3 months.
Wow.
And so out of that, it just makes you recognize, how much resilience is important. But the tricky, or I guess the most important power up that I would have loved to have for that company at that time is a good sales and operations planning process with or without a tool, but especially if you can get some of that real-time analytics and watch and be able to anticipate or even be able to see, hey, why is the supplier not shipping on time anymore? And recognizing the fact that when you give them a call, they're going to tell you, oh, by the way, we can't use our shipping computer anymore. We can't buy materials. We can't ship materials. We can't talk to UPS. Can't send you EDI. And so, being able to diversify, but really having the planning process in place to ensure your success, regardless of kind of what happens, whether it's a supplier, a country, or even a canal, let's say, that has a disruption.
Yeah, that is so true. And also, you want to make sure that your communication and that you're part of their cybersecurity plan if that ever were to happen, right? You can't just rely on necessarily somebody just disclosing that it's happened to you as a client or even the client to the vendor. And so you want to make sure that everybody is on the same page and that communication is definitely part of that contract, right, Dag?
Absolutely. Yeah. And there are companies out there that try to ascertain the level of maturity of the IT systems in your supplier network and give that to you as a data point that kind of can go into a composite risk score.
Ooh, I like that. Everybody needs to ask for that one. All right. So what's one homegrown hack your company has used to build a more nimble local supply chain? And did it go viral or did it flop? Dag, I'm going to send it back to you. And then Steve, if you've got something to add, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. I mean, as I talk to many supply chain, distribution, manufacturing, right, automotive, I would say that Excel is the homegrown hack, right? It's filling all the gaps. It's dumping orders in there and determining where are we going to source these things from, and what kind of price. Like if you don't have, going back to the sales and operations planning tooling and tool sets, if you don't have that, then dumping your information into Excel and just adding 10% to all the costs. Let's see how this shakes out, and how does that change the possible price we can charge our customers. And then, of course, when we change the price of our products, that means that the demand for our products is changing. So it just kind of has that trickle down effect. But at MCA Connect, I'm in the business of replacing Excel, although I don't think I'll ever get to the end.
I was having this discussion earlier today because we did a poll and we said something about what does your supply chain life look like right now? And 32% out of 140 votes or something like that said that they're like knee deep in Excel and will never leave Excel. And I was talking to Eric Johnson from the JOC about this, and he was like, I'm just not sure if we're ever going to be able to replace it, but we'll be able to have tools that really help to manage it, or at least get the data off the Excel spreadsheets. So I don't know if we're past the point of which version are we on, or, download, upload, download, but I guess time will tell.
Absolutely.
Steve, did you have anything to add to this one? Have you seen anything, or do you have a homegrown hack you can share with us on resiliency?
I don't know if it's a homegrown hack as homegrown as Excel. What a great example. But I think one of the things that's just for me over the last couple of years, and even more in the last 6 months, is really helping my clients with creating platforms of collaboration, and they can be as easy as SharePoint sites, or as complex as integrated sort of portals and whatnot, but really communicating with your partners and sharing information in this day and age, especially as we get more and more folks using 3PLs, co-manufacturers, doing the things we've been talking about today, and making sure that they have the partnerships in region to be able to flex when they need to. How do you share information quickly and efficiently? And so, we've seen a lot of standing up things really quickly, sharing information, trying to make it secure, using the same types of tools, and then obviously trying to accelerate them. So that's something that I've been seeing a lot of, and folks investing a lot of their time and energy towards.
I love that. Now, I think I'm hearing the homegrown hack is also collaboration is the future of business, which I say a lot. So I just had to bring that into the conversation.
Love it.
All right, Dan, you're going to wind us down here. Explain the magic of a well-orchestrated, resilient supply chain to a fifth grader with a fun analogy. What does that look like?
Well, the first thing that came to mind for me was how everything has to come together for the Happy Meal. And every fast food restaurant has them, and the components are coming from everywhere. So you got the superhero toy maybe coming from China, and it better get there on time, otherwise you got a big problem.
Yes.
Especially when you've got all those distribution centers and they've got a schedule in terms of when those are hitting their stores. So you've got that. You've got the packaging that's most likely domestic somehow. And then you've got the food and other components coming from South America and North America, and it's all got to come together at just the right time, just the right place. And if it's a home delivery, it might be a superhero delivering that as well. So
I love that. I think all the delivery drivers should wear capes. I mean, that's just my opinion. But fun fact, I used to handle the McDonald's Canada account for distribution of Happy Meal toys. And so I can definitely tell you that they do come from overseas, and definitely the children, the people who buy the Happy Meal toys, especially when they buy them for those collectibles, get very upset when they are not there on time.
It's a big deal. The summer of '87, when I was in China and Hong Kong, I had 40 million units for Taco Bell, Burger King over that summer, in addition to the core business that I had to support. So I had every sewing machine in southern China booked for various stuffed toys. Very stressful time, I could tell you. That's probably what first came to mind.
No, I love that. And it's such a great story about supply resiliency. And that's a wrap on today's supply chain stories, remixes, and wild what ifs. Whether your supply chain's rocking a superhero cape, dodging curveballs, or proudly showing off its passport, remember, resilience isn't just a strategy, it's an adventure. And I think we would all agree to that. So stay curious, stay scrappy, and of course, stay tuned for the next round of news with Let's Talk Supply Chain. A big thanks to Dan, Dag, and Steve for joining me for the episode today. Thanks, everybody.